All right, welcome back to Retire Without Borders. This is my first video in a long time, and it's a little hard to get back to. So, just so you know, I've been making videos on retirement for about a year, and I stopped for a while. Why? Well, had some personnel issues. My mother is 83 years old, and unfortunately, she was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer last year. So, nevertheless, I've been working with her and helping as much as I can, being retired myself. Fortunately, she lives about a mile from me, so it's at least doable that I can go over to her and help her out. Any case, I wanted to start on a new video, and I've been meaning to get to this for several months, but here it is. It is now late July 2026, in fact, almost August by the time this video comes out. Oh, that noise you hear will be my 15-year-old dog, Jackie, who is dealing with some health issues of her own. Anyway, so this video is entitled Don't Retire Overseas Until You Have This Much Money in 2026. And if you've spent any time on YouTube, you probably realize that you see these videos, retire overseas for $1,500 a month. I've done that. And it sounds wonderful until it isn't. Technically, they're not wrong. You can retire overseas for $1,500 a month. That sounds fantastic. But here's the problem. Just because you can retire for $1,500 a month doesn't mean you really should. In fact, relying on that small number could put you in the possibility of having some kind of emergency later. I'll get to that later. So, the myth of the magic number. What is this magic number that you need to retire overseas? Oh, Jackie. So, there really isn't one universal retirement number. Every article online tries to give one. The problem is, every person's situation is different. I would not be able to retire on $1,500 a month. I have some medical issues that more than likely will require treatment later, and I don't want to be stuck worrying about that. I probably would need more like $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Also, renting versus owning. Do you own your own property right now? Can you use that as seed money to get overseas? I can. I own property. My house is paid off, and I could easily sell it and move to a very nice location in another country. But not everybody could. Also, I have a good pension. I worked at Los Angeles County for 20 years. I was a contractor before that. I have pretty good savings. And my wife is a retired teacher. Between our two savings and pensions, we're good. Also, do you want to live in a big city or a small town? I mean, yeah, living in some beautiful town like Mexico City or Paris or Rome sounds wonderful, but the costs are going to be way higher than living in a smaller town like, let's say, Guanajuato or Leon or, let's say, Pieve Ligure. Also, what do you want to do? I mean, for me, I like to travel. I like to travel a lot. I've been to many different countries. I plan to go to many more once my personal situations are cleared up. And travel is expensive. It can be less expensive depending on how you do it, but it still costs some money. So the question becomes, what is the magic number for retiring overseas? Well, depends on where and what you want to do. So if you just saw my video on Ecuador, you can say $2,000 a month is great. You can live there just fine. But that's very different than, let's say, living in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, or Lisbon, Portugal, Bangkok, Thailand, or Kuala Lumpur. So what you really should do is focus on flexibility than looking at a minimal number. So let's go over some 5 expenses that a lot of people tend to forget when retiring overseas. First off, and I mentioned this many times in my videos, healthcare. Quick aside, my mom's parents did not have healthcare in their retirement. As such, they had to pay for private health insurance, which took up about 60% of their pension. I do not want to be stuck in that situation. I have healthcare in my retirement, and I want to make sure that wherever I move to, healthcare is something I can get. So the reality is, even though there's free healthcare in most countries, you do want private healthcare of some sort. I have friends in various countries that rely on the public healthcare, and it's not the best. Having some sort of private healthcare does help. Um, and even in affordable countries, you need some kind of healthcare budget. Here's the second expense: flights home. You really do need to plan on this. I've mentioned it in every one of my videos. You're going to want to come home sometime. Um, I really don't know anybody who plans to move overseas and stay there permanently forever. The reality is, your kids are going to have kids. You want to see grandkids. There's going to be some big reunion from your high school or college. You want to go to that. There may be some issue with friends that you want to take care of. Whatever it is, you might want to go home, if not frequently, at least once in a while. So you need to know what's that cost is going to be. A last minute international flight can cost anywhere from $1,200 to $2,500. So you got to be able to budget for that. The third expense is not something you really think about, but it's there. It's inflation. Your retirement dollars are set. I am on my pension. I will get a cost of living, but I doubt it will keep up with inflation. Right now, my cost of living increases are about 1 to 2%. Inflation is at 4%. So I want to make sure that my savings and my budget will carry me in the future, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And here's another expense. They don't really mention this, and I have been guilty of this as well. Most YouTube videos show you living in a tiny apartment outside the city, no air conditioning in a hot area, no car, you don't have a washer or dryer. But after 6 months, you probably want to move up to something better. So you need to budget for that. Yes, you can get by on the bare minimum, but you probably don't want to, at least not at our age. And then the fifth expense: emergencies. What happens if your laptop dies? What happens if your phone is stolen or gets dropped in the water? What happens if your passport's suddenly stolen? Or let's say you have a broken leg. Um, or let's say you suddenly have some weird incurable disease that requires treatment at a facility in the United States. You need to fly home and deal with that. So there are issues like that. There's unexpected repairs that come up. The plumbing leaks. There was a large fire below your apartment, and suddenly you have smoke damage all over your beautiful sofa. Stuff like that. It's going to happen. So you need to be able to budget for that. Um, these aren't exciting expenses, but they are expenses, and you need to be able to deal with them. So, what are retirement budgets? What can you expect? So let's look at a bare minimum retirement budget. The $1,500 a month that's mentioned. So realistically, $1,800 to $2,000 a month minimum. This is where you have your smaller apartment, you cook most of your meals internally, you travel limited, and you watch every dollar. It does work. You can do it. And by the way, Jackie here agrees with this. But it doesn't give you much room for things to happen, and stuff will happen. How about a comfortable budget? Well, $2,500 to $3,500 a month probably is going to be much better. You can have a nicer apartment. You can have more time to eat out at decent restaurants. You can have private health care. Also, you can travel more. If you live in a cool country like Mexico, you definitely want to travel around. Mexico has so much to offer. In fact, every country I've covered has so much to offer. And there's a lot of cool places to go within those countries. And you want to be comfortable with that. Now, if you want a little bit better off, $4,500 a month is a good number to look for. That'll get you freedom of choice. You won't go, oh my gosh, if your tires blow out or if your water heater dies. You're not luxurious, but you are comfortable. And that's probably something you want to look for. In fact, your stress will be far reduced. You won't have to wake up in the morning going, oh my gosh, it's the 15th, and can I make it till the end of the month before my retirement check comes in? So what I'm trying to get at is this number isn't exactly set in stone. Again, it varies by country. Let's take a look at Mexico, for example, one of my favorite retirement abroad countries. There's different places you can go where your costs will change dramatically. Merida, for example, that is very low. However, Mexico City, somewhat higher. Puerto Vallarta, I love Puerto Vallarta, but the costs there are significantly higher than, say, Lake Chapala. So, Ecuador is another country you can look at. Again, I did a video on Ecuador. You can check it out. Uh, Ecuador is far cheaper than Mexico. It has much more affordable housing, and the healthcare is excellent. In fact, it's one of the best values in Central America. Some of my wife's cousins were just in Portugal. It's beautiful there. I would love to live in Portugal. I did a video on Portugal also. Check it out above. And it's great. However, it is more expensive. It is in the European Union and it has higher housing costs, especially in Lisbon and in the Algarve. So you need a little bigger budget. However, on the flip side, Thailand. I mentioned also in my video on Thailand that my wife and son just spent some time there. It is gorgeous. I, in fact, intend to go there next year myself. And unlike Portugal, it is very, very affordable. Um, you have beautiful scenery, wonderful food. I love Thai food. In fact, we have many Thai restaurants here in Los Angeles. We go to at least once a week. And the Thai people are very friendly. I have several neighbors who are Thai, and I've learned a few words already. Malaysia, that's another affordable country, often overlooked. Again, I did a video on Malaysia. You can look at it there. And it has some beautiful areas, and it costs far less than other countries. It has modern infrastructure, great healthcare, excellent value. You do have to learn some Malay, though. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know anybody from Malaysia. Again, I live in Los Angeles, where I have a fairly diverse group of peers, and I honestly do not know anybody from Malaysia. Costa Rica. I love Costa Rica. I've always wanted to go there. I have friends who have spent time there. I have friends who developed resorts there. It's a Spanish-speaking country, which is easy. I speak Spanish, and it is beautiful. However, it is no longer as cheap as it was, say, a few years ago. So the thing you need to do is stop asking how much. Start asking where. Where do I want to go, and how can I get there? So here's the thing. This is the mistake that sends people home. It isn't crime. It isn't culture shock, although that is something. It isn't even language. I mean, yes, language is challenging, but you will get through it. It is basically running out of money. You go to some place and you realize that, oh my gosh, I need to pay for whatever, and I didn't have the money saved up for it. Or, oh my gosh, I can live in this tiny apartment for $1,500 a month, but it smells, there's noise all the time, and I don't have air conditioning. Whereas this other apartment for $2,000 a month is in a much nicer neighborhood and has air conditioning. So be aware of those things before you move. Do your research. Every unexpected expense can become a crisis if you don't have plans for it. No, you don't need to be wealthy. I am definitely not wealthy, but you do need to have a margin available for you. So to wrap it up, what is my recommended retirement target? This is where your opinion carries the majority of weight. If someone asked me today, what number would I need to retire in Mexico or Puerto Vallarta or whatever, I'd say enough income to cover your monthly expenses plus at least one of your expenses set aside so that you are available to pay for whatever emergency that happens. That gives you freedom. It gives you options. It gives you confidence. It allows you to sleep at night. And remember, retirement isn't about escaping America, although some people like to do that. It's about building a better life in another country. You're still American. I will always be an American. But you go in realizing that I can live a better life someplace other than the United States. So, in closing, what monthly retirement budget are you planning around? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. I mean, are you looking at $1,500 a month? Is $2,000 a month more like it? $3,000 a month? I'm curious. And if you're still deciding where to retire, you look at my different videos. There'll be some listed at the end. And tell me, what would you like to see? What countries are you interested in retiring? Thank you again. Until next time, do watch this video on how to test drive a country before you move there. It will help tremendously.